Hi, everybody, and welcome to our group critique for Milestone 3. What we're going to be doing in this particular group critique is just looking at everybody's caricature projects, and in this particular phase, we're taking a big leap where we're finally putting our character together in Photoshop and using the photographs that you have selected or revised. And then what you're doing is you're putting your character together using layer masks. And yeah, and so that's the main thing. And you're also going to be putting your name on the character just in simple text. Next week, what we will be doing is we'll be adding the next layer of or level of design. We're going to be designing the text a little bit more and then adding a background. So that's what we'll be focusing on next week. But for this week, it's just really about putting the character together. And so we're going to be looking at the layer masks themselves, see what we can do to perfect them if we need to. We'll take a look at the design of the character, and in general at this stage most people are in the rough draft phase, so we'll see, what can we do to make the character better. Maybe you need to rethink some parts of it or replace some of the photographs. That's typical at this stage. So really keep an open mind to feedback. There is going to always be things that you need to change in a project like this. It is really the nature of design. I think that's one of the very first things that surprised me about being in a design environment as opposed to a fine art environment. In a fine art environment, a lot of it is really just your particular vision for, in my case, I like to paint. And so it's my vision. It's like nobody can really advise me on what to do in general. But in design, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to communicate in a more sort of service-oriented way. By service-oriented, I mean we're really solving a problem for a client or our art director, and so we're trying to really develop a skill that communicates, and that is a pretty different process than what is the fine art creative process, which a lot of people who come to design actually have a background in fine arts. I know I did. A lot of people do, where you've just been really a creative person and you've just done your own thing and you've really explored things on your own. Um, and so moving into design is where we're more collaborative. It's not so independent. And it is still, there is an independent, like a lot of people still work very independently in design, but there's a collaborative element where we get a lot of feedback. Like you'll send a design to a client and your client will say, oh yeah, I'd like you, I don't know, and they give you a lot of feedback and then you have to incorporate it. Or, give them a good argument about why the design you've created for them is really strong based on your training as a designer. So we've got that kind of thing going on where, and I'm just sort of prefacing this to say, feedback is just a really normal part in design. And the sooner you can just feel comfortable with that and, get your bearings and feel a sense of balance with that, I think the faster you're going to advance as a designer. And that doesn't mean that you have to follow somebody else's advice on your design. You have to use your critical thinking skills to decide what works. But in general, if somebody says, I think that maybe this upper right-hand part needs a certain something to happen, sometimes people will give you suggestions based on their own way that they would solve a problem, which is what I sometimes do in this class because of the time constraints of this class, that we don't have a lot of time for me to just say keep working on that. I like to provide concrete suggestions, and sometimes I think it's really helpful too. But you can sort of take a certain kind of like, oh, that needs to be worked on a little bit more, and then you can solve it your own way because there's like hundreds of ways that you can fix a certain area. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's kind of like somebody pointing to the fact that your design needs maybe a little more revising, and then you can take the reins and decide how that goes, or sometimes you can. So this is the classroom in a book exercise for task 1, which is where you're learning about things like puppet warp and layer masks and all that kind of stuff. And I apologize because what happened between the last time I taught this class and this time, which was really only a few weeks, is that Adobe changed this particular chapter so that the videos and our examples in the instructions look a little different. There's a different model. The model looks different, but in general, there's a lot of things that are the same. The background's the same and the general tasks are the same. So you can still continue to use the video tutorials for this assignment. But I just wanted to point out that I think the model is different for this assignment. And so so essentially you can use the textbook in conjunction with the video tutorials, or you can use the video tutorials on their own or the textbook steps on their own. It's up to you. They're really the same thing. But what you're going to do is you're going to complete, I'm actually going to just, if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn off these layers here. This is what it's going to look like approximately. Yours might look a tiny bit different, but this is how it's going to look approximately when you're done. Then the additional assignment instructions are going to have you add an additional photo. And this is where you want to make sure that you're adding a photo and then you're going to hide the background using a layer mask. Now this is a little bit confusing because in the Classroom in a Book exercise, because of the nature of the steps, the background, even though you're using a layer mask, the background actually gets deleted. That's unfortunate for the Classroom in a Book. But when you're adding it, what's gonna happen? I right-clicked here to disable the layer mask, and you can see, oh look, here's the background. So the background was actually just hidden with the layer mask, and this is what you want to be doing for any time you add a photo. Is you want to try to, if you're masking something, you want to try to use a layer mask like this without deleting the background, because this is what's called non-destructive editing. So now you can go back and like make changes, you know, and you won't have to like find that photo again if you want to make a change to the layer mask. So this is what it's going to look like. So if I have some feedback in your comments area in the task submission for this, saying you need to use a layer mask, this is what you're aiming for. Now, how can you get that? I recommend using the video tutorial for the caricature project that we're going to be critiquing later, because that actually has a really excellent video on how to really quickly mask a photograph, and so you can just use that video for this assignment. Okay, so I'm going to enable this again. So that's what you're going to be adding. You're also going to be adding a shadow, just like you did the shadow of the girl. So you can just add one. You can put it in approximately the same place. It's nice to be able to do that. And the final thing you're going to be doing here is you're going to be adding an adjustment layer to somehow, you know, change the color of your added photo. And you can do whatever you want with that. And I'm going to click this on to show you. There it is. That's the change. That's the adjustment layer. And we did adjustment layers at least 1 week. Last week we did layer, I think it was last week we added an adjustment layer into the postcard, and it's exactly the same process where you add an adjustment layer, you make sure to clip it just like we did last week. And there's also in the learning path for this week, hold on, the learning week, the milestone 3 learning path has adjustment layers in it as well if you want to learn more. Okay, so okay, that's it. So let me know if you have any questions about anything that we've covered in terms of this assignment. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense and you'll be able to, if you need to, make the necessary revisions. Okay, Lawrence, all right, so it looks like you're working with Flippin' Food Fred or Fran. Just, you know, put the name of the character that you chose, Flippin' Food Fred or Fran, you know, just anywhere. It doesn't have to be any type of design type at all. You know, we're going to work on that next week. So you just grab the type tool and you just click it somewhere. You can, you know, if you just want to make some basic adjustments, like making it bigger, for example, you can go right here and make it a little bit bigger in there. And then you just type in the name, whatever you want. Okay, so yeah, so moving on to your character, I think your character design is really coming along nicely. When I looked at your photographs last week, I thought, oh wow, there's a lot of complexity in the character, and sometimes that can be hard. But I think because of the choice of photographs, you really found photographs that I think are very they're clean and simplified, you know, very distilled down to their essence, really already quite cleaned up, and I think they look good together. Also, there's a lot of linear elements here, like this zigzag that kind of picks up on the zigzag of the eyes and like the lines in here. Um, and then you've got a lot of circular elements. Anyhow, I think it's really looking good. I don't have any suggestions at this point for the design. Um, and so your layer mask. So what I do here is I just look and check to see the layer mask, and I can see you've got layer masks all the way through here, which is awesome. That's the main thing we're doing for this assignment. Here I noticed, oh, there's no layer mask for the cheese, but I noticed you had created the layer into a smart object, which allows it to be non-destructively edited. We're going to cover smart objects if we haven't. I think we've already covered them. If we haven't, we will cover them in future. But you've used them, which is great. It's not necessary to use them, but what happens is when you double click on it, you can actually see the layer mask now here in when we open it up. So we can see, oh, there it is. There is the photograph. So this whole idea of layer masks is so important because it means that later on we can make changes to the design, and we're, this idea of non-destructive editing, which is something that we will be working on throughout the class as much as we can. That's really what layer masks are doing. Okay, so that looks great. Now the last thing I tend to want to do here is to actually and if you don't mind, I'd like to use your particular project as an example of how to kind of tweak the layer masks a little bit. This may be helpful for other students. So the video tutorial that we're using for this assignment that are in the instructions for how to build a layer mask, they're really, it's a great tutorial, but you may find even following the tutorial that you may have to do some additional tweaks yourself after Photoshop has created the layer mask. So I'm going to use your, first of all, I'm just going to unlock the background. You've got the background here already, which is great. And I'm actually going to take and put a darker background behind your character so that we can see the layer, sort of how the layer masks are working a little bit more. And you can use here any dark background, folks. So just anything. It can be a gray, or let's just make it black right here. And then I just grab the rectangle tool and just kind of behind it. And you can just, this is just something you can do temporarily. I don't need that for now. And then you can actually start seeing the different parts of it. You can see that there's a few bits here, pieces that could be cleaned up a little bit. And that's what we'll do. We'll look at two different methods. And why is this important? So, because, when we looked at this, we're like, oh, it looks great. Why do we need to clean it up anymore? The reason why is when we put a background next week, chances are the background may be a little bit darker in places or in a lot of places, and you're going to start noticing these little bits of these. So everything in here, this is little bits of the photograph that are still peeking through that we're going to actually add to the masks and clean them up. Okay, so chances are most folks may have to do a little bit of this, and it's a really good technique to know because, again, Photoshop is pretty smart at figuring out stuff, but sometimes you need to help it along with the layer masks. Okay, so what are these little lines here? These little lines here are actually lines, let me zoom in a little bit here. They're actually lines that are created even when you do a layer mask perfectly. I don't know, I've never quite figured out. So, okay, I'm right-clicking. You can see here I'm right-clicking. This is a really good trick if you don't yet know this. I don't know if we've covered this or not, but when you right-click anywhere on your character, like the very spot that you right-click on is going to show you all of the layers underneath that one place, and it'll change throughout your design because every part probably has a different, maybe combination of photographs. Some areas might not have any photographs behind them. So this top one, and then you stack down, those are the layers, in order. And then what you can do is you can just find that layer, and automatically in the layers, you'll automatically go to that spot. So it's so much easier than just kind of, especially when you get a lot of layers, trying to figure it out. So I actually just sort of chose this part here to see, is this where this white edge is? So this is actually part of that, maybe of that photograph. Let's see. Yeah, so there it is. And so there's this little row of pixels that sometimes happens even when you do a layer mask perfectly, it appears here. Again, I don't know why it happens, but it is a very easy way to fix that. And to do that, what we do is, here's the layer mask right here. Let's just maybe zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to turn this on or off now so to get a sense of, okay, so it looks like we're getting a line all the way around here, all the way down here. You see that's the line here. So what I do is I'm going to manually hide this area. This is actually the photograph showing, so if we reveal this, this is the edge. That's easier to see. Sorry, I should have done that. This is the edge here that's showing. So what we're going to do, let's enable this again. I'm doing right clicks just to enable and disable. I'm going to click directly on the layer mask. You don't want the photograph here. You want the layer mask. Now if you look at the layer mask carefully, you can see that black, the color black is hiding and white is revealing. You don't have to memorize that. You can just always look in your layer mask to remind yourself of that. That's what I do. So black is hiding. So what we're going to do now is when we click on the layer mask, this is really key to understanding this. What happens is that the tools here, this black and white color, actually it'll change from color to black and white. If you see that, you'll notice that happening because now the tools are going to be applied to the layer mask rather than the photograph. So all we need to do is take a paintbrush, and I'm going to use the bracket key on my keyboard, and I'm going to use the right bracket key to make it bigger because it makes it faster. And what I'm going to do is, so I've got black here in the foreground color, so you can use these double-headed arrows here to click back and forth. I want black because I want to hide these lines. Now I'm just going to go over them. See that? So what I'm actually doing is I'm painting black onto the layer mask, and therefore I am hiding this little edge, and I can go all the way around. Okay, so what you'd want to do is for all of these little white bits, you want to go and find the photograph. Again, just same technique, you just sort of, I think probably somewhere in here. You can kind of get a sense, just your photographs, but you can sort of, there's another one, see? So we click here on the layer mask and then we just paint along those lines. That's it. It's really actually kind of fun. You can do this, if you're watching TV or something like that. Okay, so that's the very first thing. Now the other thing, I use the painting on the layer mask for a lot of different techniques. Maybe we'll come across some other things as well that we can use. So maybe we'll get to this a little bit later. But so now you'll notice too, there's a little bit of white in here. Can you see that? And we want to get rid of that because when we put it over a background, some other background, we'll notice that that white's there. So again, we're going to right click here to find the French fries. They're really great looking French fries. And so we're going to click on the layer mask again. Now there's two, I would recommend two different things. Two possible different things for this particular area. One area is you can actually do the same thing. So again, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Hold on. Oh, I want to do that later. So again, click on the layer mask. Now you can take the brush again. Here's the brush, and I'm going to make the brush a little smaller. And can you see here? You can actually go in here and brush to clean this up, and this is where you can really zoom in. I would probably zoom in even further, and then you can kind of very carefully kind of just clean that up. You see that? That's a great technique for like when other techniques don't fail, or when other techniques fail, you can kind of go in there. Something else you can try though is to maybe let Photoshop do that for you. Sometimes Photoshop you can use the tools in Photoshop to figure out where that edge is, and to do that you then go to the layer mask again, double click. Actually, I'm going to go back one step here. To do this, I'm actually going to turn off the black background because it will help you guys see better what might happen, some things that might happen in here. So I'm going to double click on here. Okay. Now, the view, when you view in this is a particular area. It's like the refine mask area, and there's a bunch of different tools in here, but the first tool is the view menu right in here. And what you can do here is choose the background you want to see your image on, your design on. And so you can have onion skin, marching ants, overlay. I always choose from between on black or on white, and I always pick where would be the background that will make it most obvious that I'm like looking at. And on black, which is the choice that's, you can see here on white, that doesn't help us at all because that's what we already saw. So on black is really what we want, because again, it's just, this is not going to change, the background we choose here is not going to change the background on the when we go back into the image. It's only to help us see the layer mask more clearly. So I like on black. Now when you choose this, sometimes you'll notice, depending upon the settings, you may notice that it doesn't look black. That's because of this opacity setting. Sometimes when you open it up, it might be set really low, and I like to zoom it all the way up so it's solid black, because that makes it easy to see. Okay, all right, so we're all set up on the view menu. Now what we can do is, by default, there's something called an edge detection tool that should be just set up by default, and it's this little button right here. And then what you can do is, again, you can use the bracket tools. I could make this a little bigger. I think this is fine. And then what I can do is just click down and drag over this area. And I'm just going to do it one time, and Photoshop will figure it out. Okay, so that worked great. I'm going to do it again here. It's just finding the edge for me, and we can just go through. Sometimes this tool works really great, like it is here, and sometimes it doesn't work so great. It usually tends to work really good when there's already a strong contrast, like between the French fries and the background. The key is you don't want to go over it more than once. Maybe twice at the most, because what'll happen is if you go over it more times, I don't know if I'll be able to do it here, but sometimes what'll happen is you'll get kind of this weird sort of muddy, transparent kind of look. It's actually doing a tiny bit, but sometimes it can get really quite a bit stronger. And then you, yeah, so do the pass just once. So I think that's it. So, okay, so those are the two methods for cleaning up the background. Let's turn back that white background now, the black background again. Again, this can be a temporary layer you leave in here and turn on and off when you want. But there it is. So that's, yeah, so I would just go through here and just clean up these edges, doing that method, and it would be, oh yeah, I wanted to look at the cheese here. I noticed something going on with the cheese too. Let's get to the cheese and see why. What do we have here? So this, yeah, so why is it, yeah, there's maybe a little bit of a, let's go back in here and see. Yeah, that's actually, yeah, you can see that it's the highlight that's happening here that is making it look a little bit, let's get out of this for a minute. So I would tend to either leave that, or I might paint over these areas to reveal. Let's just do that together, because that's another good technique. So let's go back in here. And if you're not using smart objects in your design, then you would just do this. This is one of the areas here. You would just do this right inside all of the layers. But what I would do here is I would actually probably go, and instead of using black, I would use white, which will reveal some of this background. Okay, so same technique as before, except okay, so I'm going to actually rasterize this for the moment. So you might actually have to undo the smart objects to do this. It doesn't look like it's going to allow me to do that, but I would go in here and paint. Hold on a second here. There we go. No, I don't want that. Oh, hold on. Let's see. I've never done this within a smart object. I apologize. So this is, I'm a little bit on a, there we go, on a learning curve here. Okay, so this is what I would do here. I would just kind of pull this back in here so that you get that, that's at the highlight, that even though it looks almost white. And what you can also do too is you can actually go over the edge here to see where the background starts. This is what I sometimes do. So I paint back and add a little white, and then, that's really the background, it's not white. And then I reverse back into the black, and that tells me where this edge is, if that makes sense. So you can kind of guess now, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo this edge so that it's accurate, you know, to the background. Now, so this happened is just because Photoshop saw this little highlight here on the cheese as being part of the background. So it was doing its job. It's just, you know, sometimes you have to tell Photoshop how to do things. So I would do the same thing here, get the white, and then I would just go there. I don't even think I need to go like do what I did before. Maybe I'll do it. I went over a little bit here, and then you can come back and mask it. That's it. So so I'm going to close this up. Say save. Okay, so you can see there that it just got that a little bit more in there. And you know, when you zoom out, you really don't see it, but I'm being a little picky because, hey, why not? We're learning layer masks and it's fun. Anyhow, well, thank you so much, Lawrence, for allowing me to work on your project. I actually chose your project because it was you had some really good examples of how layer mask should be done, and you know, you just had these certain areas in here which allowed me to show things that everybody can really benefit from. So again, I hope that's been helpful for other folks. And yeah, let's keep going, Lauren. So that's the only thing I think you need to do here is just tweak those masks, add your name, and you're done for this week. Well, yeah, I think your design it really is coming along nicely. I love the idea of the legs. It's very cute, and the potato. Yeah, it's really cute. This sort of looking at a bug kind of like view of your character as a bug or little kind of four-legged creature. It's very cute, and all the layer masks look to be right in place, which is awesome. So, you know, again, when you get the layer masks in here, then any type of cleanup you do, the mask is there all ready to go. So that's why we use layer masks, is because it allows us to do all of these things non-destructively and kind of play with it. So for you, you know, pretty much the same thing as Lawrence. I would just make sure to put your name somewhere, you know, just anywhere. The name of your character from Milestone 1, whichever, you know, name Eclipse Entertainment you chose. And I'm actually going to do the same thing here. I'm going to just, I'm unlocking this layer here because when you unlock the layer, it allows you to edit it, and I'm going to like put a rectangle on it. But you can also, if you don't want to do that on this layer, you can just insert a new layer. If you go here and just you know, with the turning page, it'll create a blank layer, and then you can use that as well. So in a way, that's probably, having more layers is probably better. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to put this black background behind just so we can see the layer masks. And that, yeah, that looks really good. Yeah, so you can kind of see little areas in here that you might want to investigate just a little bit. Like I might just take a look. I'm going to take a look at the banana and see what the original photograph looked like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Let's see. So there's a little bit actually very similar to Lawrence right here. There's a little bit of a white blip here that you can go in here. So you can use either method that we looked at, you know, either the going manually painting it just right here on the layer, or double clicking and going into the layer mask itself. Something else. So I might take a look here, the banana. You know, so the banana, okay, so what's happening here with this banana? I was looking at this edge here and thinking, this is an edge we could address here. It doesn't look quite like a smooth kind of curve of the banana. You know, it looks like it's kind of like there's a little bit of like chunkiness kind of being cut out of it. And so what I typically do when that happens is I look at the original photograph and see, okay, what's happening with the original photograph to compare. And I can see this is why this edge, Photoshop is not able to find this edge, is because the color of the banana is the same color as the background, right? So this is one of those cases where if you can, it looks like maybe you took this photograph yourself, which is awesome, is if you can get a darker background behind it. You know, put it on a dark surface, because then you will be able to cut this out better. Because then Photoshop will understand, because what you're doing is you're giving Photoshop a job that it just can't do. And, you know, we just looked at some methods where we could fix what Photoshop couldn't fix. And in this case, we can't fix it either because we can't see that edge in order to get a nice clean edge. So this is such an important part, you know, the banana is such an important part of your project. I would try to get this element a little bit better. Okay, so I would work on that. It does look like you've got a little bit of a black line here, and so just, you know, you can just, it's coming from the potatoes, so you can do exactly what we did before. Just clean that up. Again, that's not through any problem with your masking. Neither is this either. You know, you did as good a job as you could with the photograph you had. So that's where, you know, your skill in Photoshop plus the quality of your image. Quality is not even quite the right word. Whether your photograph is going to be able to be masked because of the contrast between the foreground, like the object and the background, where that comes into play. Okay, so I'd clean up those white lines, replace the banana as best you can. I love the design. I think it's super cute. So if you can find something that's sort of similar in terms of your banana design. This Twizzler, let's just look at that Twizzler. So this Twizzler also, so this was also, I think, it's okay, you know, it's okay if you can find a Twizzler that has a little bit more, like, can you see how it's very, in a lot of places it gets to solid red, you know, if you can find a Twizzler photograph that's got more of the lines on it, can you see the highlights of the you know, of the shape of it? I think that will look, that your tail is a really important element. It's just like sitting there all on its own. I think that would be really awesome if you can just do a little bit more work on that, finding that photograph. Or if you can't find a good Twizzler photograph, then just find another photograph that looks like a long tail, you know, that's made out of a food item, and you know, just be creative. I think you can, this all looks, I think, pretty good here. The apple, let's just look at the apple here. You can see how when I'm looking at images, I'm always zooming in, because zooming in is where you can really see, you know, the edges here. So this, it's also maybe a little bit of kind of like something happening here too. Not quite sure why. It looks a little bit lumpy, and then there's a little bit of a black line here. I don't know why that's happening. Sometimes, okay, so that's from the shadow here. Okay, so let's actually maybe go here, look at this layer mask. I'm going to double click and go into this area here, and then maybe did what I do before. So again, we're using the edge detection tool, and maybe just see if I can just run along this edge and see if I can select it a little bit more cleanly. And it's actually, this is where you can see what's happening here is sometimes this will happen in Photoshop if you try to go in and find the edges. What it's actually doing is it's erasing a little bit of the mask and making it transparent, making the image transparent, and then it's also, the mask is a little transparent, so it's kind of not really doing a great job. What I might do in this case, sometimes it's easier to actually redo a mask than it is to rework a mask. So I might just go in here and I'm just going to take that out. I'm going to just delete that. And then I'm going to try it again and see. So I'm going to go in here. I'm just going to do what you probably did. Sometimes, again, sometimes it helps to just do things, a layer mask again, and I'm just going to go in and see, and I'm going to just get in here too. Sometimes you can get, okay, so there we go. There's our layer mask. Now we'll just go down to the bottom here and then hit the layer mask button. So it's, it's about the same. Maybe a wee bit better. Let's now go back in here. Sometimes we'll just go in here and see if we can just zoom around. See if that, yeah. So okay, so, I don't think I got a much better result than you did. So in that case, I might just leave what you had. Sometimes what I do in this situation is I actually go and find another example of what I'm looking for. Like I would just go find another apple. Apples are easy to find on Google Images. Maybe just kind of like find something else, maybe something that's got a little more. There's areas in here. Can you see how it's a little out of focus in places? Maybe it's here it's out of focus. So I think probably it is definitely the apple that's causing this layer mask to be a little rough around the edges. And so again, I'm being really fussy here again because, layer masks and how they work together with the photograph itself are so intertwined that if you really, if you really, at this phase, find another apple, pull it in, add a layer mask, it's good practice, and then see if you get a better edge. So anyhow, that's it. So thank you again for letting me look at your project. You guys do all the hard work. I just come in here, like you choose the photographs, you assemble them, create the design. I kind of come in here and just do a little bit of technical tweaking. So on layer masks, so it's kind of fun for me. But again, you guys are the ones who are doing all of this hard work. So yeah, I hope that's been helpful. All right, yes, look, you've got the layer mask in here, which is great. Nice job. And you've got your sketch here that you use to sort of base it on, which is great. I would say at this point, you might just want to turn this off, but you can keep it in your file. And what I would do is I would just put in another, oops, I didn't want to put it there. I want to put it down here. Just put another layer in here, and then we're going to just, we can put, so ultimately, you're going to replace this with the background. I'm going to actually start with just maybe a white background here to begin with, just so we can sort of see the design. Because the checkerboard, I think is, is a little bit, the checkerboard is a little bit hard to see the design on, you know what I mean? It kind of, it gets in the way, so you might as well remove that. Okay, so here's your design. I love the body. I think that's really cute, like the lines in here. And yeah, I think the head turned out pretty good. And so with the arms and the legs, what I might consider here just on a design level is choosing either like maybe a spade or this gardening fork and one of these legs. Maybe the wheel is kind of cute. I like the idea of him rolling around and making both the same. The reason why is because, again, I'll just show you what the difference might look like, is because when you're creating this character from, and I'm going to duplicate it right here by just coming down and duplicating it, and then you can just take it over here. I'm going to hit the Control T or Command or Control T, and I'm just going to, quickly put this in here so you can see that now, so this tends to make your character come to life a little bit more because we expect symmetry from living beings, like arms and legs that they don't have to look exactly the same, but sort of approximately the same. And that, again, that will really help your design look more alive. And I would do the same with the legs, like choose one or the other. And if you like the fork, use the fork instead, Something you can also experiment with your design is taking your arms and legs and see, does it look more realistic, I mean, with that, whatever that means. If maybe it's behind the torso, kind of coming out behind it, you know, rather on top. I don't know. It's hard to say. In your case, I actually think maybe, um, you know, both of like it's got quite a natural look to it by being rounded. It almost looks like it does go into the body. You know, it sits in the body. So maybe you could leave it that way. Just, you know, you can sort of experiment. Um, and yeah, okay. So that's it for just the design. We'll talk more about the design, but those are some things later on, but those are some things you could think about now. The other thing I would do with your character is definitely make your character big, like bigger. Try to like really fill the space, you know, put the name in of your character somewhere, and then put the character, you know, give it a little breathing room around the edges, but really fill it up. It's going to be the most important thing in your design. So even right now you want to, you know, you want to enlarge it. And again, you can just use that using the transform tools. Let's see, so we will now just check the layer masks, see how they're going. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. Oh, why did it do that? I think they look pretty good. You could probably go in here and clean up this edge here. I think it's probably coming from here. Yeah, it looks like it's a little blurb there. So you can kind of clean it up using any of the techniques that we've looked at, you know, yeah, that looks good down here. That looks really good. Nice job here. So just clean that up. Maybe clean this up here. Um, you know, in here too, you might want to clean up this little bits of white. And you know, if you choose that part of your design. Um, okay, so I think that's it. So good start with your character design. You know, just kind of working a little bit more on the design and the masks and add the name. Okay, Susan, I'm just reading through here. Yeah, great that you changed some things. If you didn't feel it's working, it's exactly what you want to do. Um, and yeah, and throughout, you know, throughout the class, again, you can make a lot of adjustments, and you know, anytime you feel you need to change something. Yeah, good. Okay, so you've got your, hold on a second here. Name, great, Flippin' Food Fran. Your character, that looks really cute. You've got all the layer masks in here, so I'm just going to go real quick right in here and do the black test or the dark test just to take a look at the layer masks. And yeah, that looks great. Nice job here. Everything looks really good. All of the masking looks very clean and accurate. Nice. So yeah, I don't think there's anything you need to change here. I do possibly, so mostly I'm really kind of going at with the in terms of the design, some of the broader strokes, and I think this looks really good the way it is. But I might continue to play with some of the elements in here. It may be I'm wondering if it's a little bit too busy at this point, like and that can happen very easily when you're working with objects. I love the idea of the bow for like a little you know, the bow tie pasta as a bow. I think that works really well. Maybe the strawberry is too much. I might just keep playing with it. You know, maybe look at it every day, you know, and just sort of examine it and see if there's anything, you know, you can kind of experiment with it. Um, I might make the arms just a little bit thicker if you can, or bigger or thicker, just because I think that, oops, well, that's too big. Because of the sort of the large, like the other elements are quite large, and the arms feel like they might be getting a little lost. So you could experiment, see, maybe if you don't like that, that's okay, but you know, maybe make them a tiny bit larger so that they stand out a bit more. But I think this is really coming along nicely. So good job with your layer masks, and I look forward to seeing your next version of the project. Yeah, I think your character design is really coming along nicely. It's got very sort of cute quality to it. I love the colors already with it. That is something we can keep experimenting with in future weeks in terms of, like, we're going to work with color later on, just as a comment for everybody, that we can do all kinds of amazing things with colors of our objects and change them quite dramatically. Um, so we'll look at that later. But yeah, I think this is looking good. And so I think that there's a couple things here I would work on a little bit more. It looks like you've got a layer mask applied, but it looks like what happened is that you deleted the background before you added the layer mask, which is so easy to happen. You know, it's a very easy step. And what you want to do, I'm just going to put the black behind her. What you want to do is you want to have the photograph remaining, not like the whole thing, not just the object. So you want the background. So what I'd like you to do is rebuild this file, which I know it seems like, oh, that's going to be a lot of work, but you'll find it goes really fast. Make sure to use the video instructions for this assignment. There's a really short video in the instructions for task 2 that will walk you through how to make sure that you don't delete the background. So you're just going to rebuild everything. It shouldn't take you very long, especially now that you've got your design built. And while you're doing that, what I would do is just make your character bigger. Like really fill the page with your character so, you know, it comes all the way, you know, almost to the, not almost to the bottom, but leave a little space and, you know, leave a little space at the top, but really fill the page so that it really takes center stage. And then add the name of the character as well that you used from um, milestone 1. Okay, I think when you do that, you know, we can talk more about design next week, but I think you've already gotten that, you know, you've assembled it in a way that I think looks pretty good. And so now it's just a matter of getting the technical part and getting it a little larger and adding the name. All right, so I've already done the black test, black background text on your project, and it looks great in terms of your layer mask. You did a really nice job with that, which again is so important for this particular assignment. So yeah, so you had a question about your design. Everything appears a little floating. Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit of what some of my thoughts about why that might be happening. So I think the legs and the arms look really good in terms of they're starting to really look like kind of, you know, like the legs look like big clunky legs, and then the arms are a little lighter. Something, the guitar, so keep in mind that I've been doing this class for a while, and so I've seen a lot of projects, and I've seen a lot of Rock and Rhapsody Roy where people use a guitar for the body, and it can sometimes work, but sometimes it's actually the guitar itself can be an obstacle for creating a character. I don't know why that is, you know. I think maybe because even though the body looks like a body, right, because it's got the curves, and we automatically start thinking, yeah, it looks like a body, but I think that there's something about all of the detail and then, you know, like the strings and the length of it, then that makes the neck that somehow then seems to contradict that first idea that it could be a good element for a body. And so I find that it's a little bit, it can be challenging, and that might be the thing that you might want to um, experiment with, like maybe a different body. Like if you can think of maybe something like simple that you could add in here as a body, like a big torso, like a round shape, or something kind of bulkier with a little less detail, like that's musically oriented, maybe a drum. Um, Let me see, what else could we use here? I just keep coming up with drum as like a tall drum. Well, you know, you can sort of do some brainstorming and see what you might be able to put in here that could work maybe as a bit more, just as and try that. Replace it. See if that works. Keep the rest of the arms and the legs. See if that body makes a difference, a different body, and then go from there. I might experiment a little bit more than with the head. I might take this. I think that this might work a little bit bit more as a head, just having this, the mic. Maybe make it a bit bigger, but definitely the body. And then, you know, if you keep this head, I would probably just remove the wire here, and that's easy. All you do is you click on the layer mask, you take black here, the paintbrush on the layer mask, and I'm just going to get this a little bit bigger, and then I'm just going to go over it and I'm going to hide it just like that. I would zoom in here to get a nice edge. I didn't do a good nice edge there, but if you zoom in you can. So that's what I'd work on a little bit more. I think I think it might just be this element. So give that a try, experiment with something else, a few more different objects for your torso, and I bet you'll be more happy with that. Okay. All right. Well, keep up the good work, and look forward to seeing your revision.